I wonder if you were going back and talking to your past self about all that's going on at this current time. I wonder what things would surprise you. Maybe it would surprise you that the kids haven't been at school for a couple of weeks. And maybe it would surprise you that you couldn't go out except for the barest essentials. And maybe it would surprise you to find that you're working at home. Maybe it would surprise your past self to find out that on Good Friday you were watching a video about the life and death of Jesus. I've noticed that watching our church's videos during this season, there's been many more people than would normally be in our church building. And if that's you, you're most welcome to be with us. I can completely understand why at a time like this, you might be wanting to find more about who God is, who Jesus is, and what he can do for you. When life is falling apart, suddenly we start to ask questions that we never expected to ask. And perhaps you're here trying to find answers. If that is the case, then let me encourage you. You couldn't be here on a better day. Because today, as we look at the death of Jesus, we look at the very centre, the very point of Jesus' life. But as you come asking questions about Jesus, I want you to imagine that right now, Jesus asks a question to you. Imagine he came to you right now and said, I could give you one thing. What would you have? Maybe some of us would ask for some inner peace. Maybe those of us with illnesses or mental illnesses would ask for Jesus to take them away. Perhaps particularly we would ask that in this current crisis, we and those we love be kept safe. Let me hone it down, because there might be a lot of things that you're tempted to ask Jesus to do. Let me give you two options. Would you ask Jesus to save your life right here and now? Or would you ask him to save your soul? What's the difference, you might ask? Well, we're going to consider that as we look at the story of Jesus meeting two very similar people in some respects, but two people who'd understood Jesus in very different ways. They were both criminals. Criminals that were crucified, one on the right hand of Jesus and one on the left. If you don't know much about the Roman world, and why would you in many respects, in the Roman world, crucifixion was the worst form of punishment. It was reserved only for those who weren't Roman citizens, and it was reserved for the very worst criminals. So these two men would have potentially been murderers, terrorists, or maybe robbers at the very least. They were violent men. Men that we would have locked up in our prisons in our day and age and thrown away the key. These men are taken out to be executed with Jesus, one on his right hand and one on his left. And they both speak to Jesus. And they both ask Jesus to do something for them. One of them asks for his life. And one of them asks for Jesus to save his soul. We read in Luke 23 verse 39, Luke's Gospel is a book that was written by someone who was investigating the stories about Jesus shortly after Jesus had died and rose again. He went and interviewed loads of eyewitnesses, and he recorded it primarily for his friend Theophilus, but eventually for people all through the ages to find out about Jesus' life. It's one of 4 Gospels. And as it talks about Jesus' death on the cross, it describes these two men. Luke says this: one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him, at Jesus. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. What's this man asking for? He's asking for his life to be saved. And that's quite understandable, isn't it? If you are being crucified, you know that your life is about to go. And so you're looking at any possible way that you could be rescued, any possible way that you could be saved. I don't know if any of you have read the Wolf Hall books. I'm midway through The Mirror and the Light, the third one. It's a story about Thomas Cromwell and all the things that happened to him during his life, during the reign of Henry VIII. And I remember it talking about Anne Boleyn about to be killed. And Thomas Cromwell says that right up until the very end, she seemed to be looking for the king to come and rescue her and save her, right up until the point when her head was severed from her body. Well, it's the same with this man. He's about to be executed, and he wants to be saved. You can understand that, can't you? And that's the case for many of us now. Many of us, if we could ask Jesus for something, we'd ask to be saved from coronavirus. Or perhaps for some of us, coronavirus is just the latest form. We'd be asking to be saved from some other illness, some other ailment that we've faced. It's a completely understandable thing. And yet, that isn't primarily what Jesus came to do. You see, this man, whilst he asked Jesus to save him, he's also hurling insults at Jesus. And the insult he uses in particular is he says, "Aren't you the Messiah?" Now, the Messiah was a title for the chosen king. The Jews believed that this great figure was going to come. He was going to rescue them from the Romans and everything bad in the world, sent by God, and to reign over his people forever. And many people believe Jesus was the Messiah. Another word for Messiah is Christ. That's a Greek word for Messiah. And we know Jesus as Jesus Christ, don't we? Because many people believe that Jesus was the Messiah. He was going round, he was healing people of their diseases, he was casting out demons, he was even raising the dead. He taught like nobody else. Whilst he split opinions, nobody denied that he did these miraculous deeds. His enemies believed he did them by the power of Satan. His followers believed he did them by the power of God. But everyone accepted that Jesus was doing these acts. And yet, if Jesus has this power, why isn't he using it now? He's allowed himself to be crucified on a cross. If he really is the Messiah, if he really has this power, surely he would save himself. And maybe he'd save me too, the criminal says. Jesus' death does cause us to question whether we've really understood what Jesus came to do. If Jesus came primarily to make our life on this earth easier, then he gave a very bad example. He came and he was born in a stable. Throughout his life, he was rejected by many, many people. And he ended his life crucified, humiliated, and rejected by the crowds around him. Even the man crucified next to him is hurling insults at him. If Jesus came just to make our lives easier, well then his crucifixion doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to this man, and it doesn't make sense to us either. Maybe you think that you would ask Jesus to save your life or to make your life better right here, right now. But what I'd say to you is this: you've not looked deep enough. There's a psychological experiment called the marshmallow test. And in the marshmallow test, children are given one single marshmallow. And they're told, if you don't eat this marshmallow for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to come back in and give you a whole bag of marshmallows. But if you eat the marshmallow, then I'll keep the bag for myself. And children up to a certain age, they're just not able to understand the idea of delayed gratification. They should wait for the bag of marshmallows rather than take the single one. Well, in a sense, this man is just the same. And many of us are just the same too. We want Jesus to sort out our situation in this life, here and now. But that's like asking for one marshmallow and we could have the whole bag. The second criminal doesn't ask Jesus to save his life. He asks for Jesus to save his soul. Let me read what he said. But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Now, what is he thinking of there? Most people believe that when the Messiah came, he would establish a kingdom, but a physical kingdom. He'd kick out the Romans and he'd establish the Jewish nation once again. But that can't be what this man believes, because he's seeing Jesus die next to him. He can't be thinking that Jesus is going to come into his kingdom now. And in fact, Jesus' response tells us what the man was thinking and where his hope truly was. Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Paradise, the word literally just meant a beautiful garden, but it came to mean to the Jews what we would probably call heaven. This idea of a future where we are with God for all eternity, in a place where there is no sorrow, where there's no suffering, where there's no sin, and where there's no death. That is what this man wanted Jesus to do for him. He didn't want Jesus just to save his life. He wanted Jesus to save his soul. If you had that option of Jesus saving your life and saving your soul, if you took saving your life right now, like we said before, it would be like taking the one marshmallow, maybe 70 years of happiness, rather than a whole eternity. If you're looking at Jesus for the first time, it's great that you've come to him looking perhaps for someone to pray to, someone to turn to with your anxiety, someone to help you when you're sick. Those are all good things, and Jesus would love to help you. But he wants to give you something even greater. He wants to save your soul. Let me ask you, like that second criminal, do you want Jesus to save your soul? Do you want him to remember you when he comes in his kingdom? Do you want on the day you die to know that after you pass from this world of suffering, you will be with him in paradise? If you don't, then go somewhere else, because Jesus is here for this purpose. He's here to take people to paradise. But if you want that, you might be asking, how? How do I get to have this paradise? That's a good question to ask. Most people think that you get to paradise, you get to heaven, by being a good person, by doing lots of good deeds. However, look at this man, look at this criminal. He admits it himself. He says to the other criminal, "Don't you fear God, since you're under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve." He recognises that he deserves to be crucified. Now, when you think of what a grisly death that was, to be nailed to a cross, what an incredible thing to admit that he deserves to be there. This man is saved despite the fact that he is not a good person. And actually, that's the case for anyone that turns to Jesus. I expect to be in paradise, but I don't expect to be in paradise because I'm a good person. Far from it. When I became a Christian, when I trusted in Jesus for the first time, I had to acknowledge that I was a sinner, that I deserved to be punished. You see, there's a greater punishment awaiting us than these men experienced on the cross. One day, God will judge the entire world. He will judge all the events of our life. All we have ever said, all we've ever done, all we've ever thought will be laid bare before him. And if there is any fault whatsoever, we will be punished in hell. Now that might seem to be unjust, but actually, to come, to see Jesus, to be saved by him, we have to acknowledge that that punishment is deserved, that we have broken God's law and that we deserve to be punished. That is the first step. If you want paradise, recognising that you don't deserve it. All the things you've done, no matter how admirable they may be, they're nothing compared to what Jesus had done. Jesus lived a life without sin. That's the standard for paradise, and it's a standard neither you nor me can achieve. But there is a way for criminals like this man to get into heaven. There is a way for sinners like me and like you to get in as well. And that is by trusting in Jesus. This man says to Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. If we cling to Jesus, if we say to Jesus, remember me, save me, rescue me, then we'll get to be in paradise as well. That's all you have to do if you want to get to heaven. You have to acknowledge that you don't deserve to be there. And you have to ask Jesus to save you, to rescue you, to take you to paradise with him. But there's one more thing we need to understand. We said that the cross really didn't make sense to the first criminal because he thought that Jesus was here to save his life on this earth. But why does Jesus need to die so that he can save our souls? Well, remember what we said. Because of our sin, because of our rejection of God, because of all we've ever said, thought and done, we deserve to be punished by God for all eternity. Jesus died on the cross to take that punishment from us. If we trust in him, then our punishment is taken by Jesus. And that's why he had to die. Shortly after this, it says in the passage, it was now about noon and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining. The sun stopped shining as a symbol of the darkness, the judgment of God that was coming on Jesus. He was taking what we deserved. And then it says the curtain of the temple was torn in two. There was this great curtain separating people from God. And yet when Jesus died, that curtain was torn to symbolise that no one was separated from God anymore if they came in Jesus, that we could all go to be with God. And then we're told Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Jesus wasn't a victim when he died on the cross. He gave his spirit to God the Father to pay the price for the sin of all the people who trusted in him. If you want to be in paradise, then you need Jesus to have died for you. But the good news is he already has. All you need to do is acknowledge your need of him. You need to cry out to Jesus and say, remember me. Maybe you're hearing this for the first time. It all sounds strange. It maybe sounds intriguing, the idea of having all the things that make you ashamed, that make you feel guilty, forgiven. That sounds like a good thing. But you feel like you need to know more before you cross over the line. That's completely understandable. Do stick with us watching these videos. Over Easter weekend, we're going to be giving some more explanations about what Jesus came to do. We'd love for you to share with us and grow in your understanding of Jesus, so you can reach a point where perhaps you'd be able to call out to Jesus and say, Jesus, remember me for yourself. But for some of you watching right now, like that man crucified next to Jesus, you recognise that I really do want my soul to be saved. I really do want to be with Jesus in paradise. Well, remember the two things he did. Firstly, acknowledge that you deserve to be punished instead of Jesus. And then ask Jesus to remember you. Ask him to save you, to rescue you through what he did on the cross. And if you do that, then Jesus says to you, just as he said to that man, you will be with me in paradise. Let me just pray. Father God, we thank you that Jesus came to give us eternal life, to give us paradise. And we thank you that when he came to die, to take the punishment for our sin. Father, if anyone is watching this video now who is feeling their sin, who's feeling their need of a Saviour, their need of Jesus, I pray that right now you would cause them to call out to you, to call out to Jesus, to remember them, to take their sin. And Father, if they do that right now, I pray that you would encourage them with those same words that we've read, that they will be with the Lord Jesus in paradise. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.